Welcome to our literature class. I am your literature guru and master, Kate Kevins, always talking ink. Today we shall go straight to our literary text, Fathers of Nation, written by Paul B Vitta. We shall closely look at chapter 1, episode 1 and 2. In the first episode, 4 strangers check in at Seamount Hotel, Banjul. None of the 4 strangers knew of the other 3 or being part of the 4. And remember, it is said this was to be the case. The 4 strangers are 1. Professor Karanja Kimani. This is a disillusioned intellectual betrayed by his country's leadership. He is 60 years old, he's a Kenyan. Number 2, we have Comrade Ngobile Melusi. He is a freedom fighter turned political dissenter representing struggle against oppressive regime. He is 70 years old. He is from Zimbabwe. Number 3, we have Pastor Chineke Chiamaka. He is a religious leader, the pastor of CIA, Church Inside Africa. He is representing the moral and spiritual voice in politics. He is about 50 years old. He is Nigerian. And the last to check in was Engineer Saif Tayu. He is a technocrat with a reformist ideas, symbolizing African technocrats who are fighting for change. He is about 40 years old. He is from Libya. What is the symbol of these 4 strangers as it is in the text? Number 1, the fact that they are strangers symbolizes Africa's disunity because though they all suffer from same leadership failures in their home countries, they are unable to recognize their shared struggles. Number 2, the 4 strangers mirrors how African states are fragmented. Each nation faces dictatorship, poverty, corruption, failed leadership, but they act alone instead of working in solidarity. Let us look at the comparative profile of the 4 strangers. We start with the first person, Professor Karanja Kimani from Kenya. He is described as a person whose hairline had retreated back to his crown. He had a habit of smacking his lips as he talked, appearing to shape each word first and then add voice to it later. What does this mean? The bald head symbolizes age. Remember, we are told he's 60 years old. It also is a symbol of stress, a symbol of disillusionment of African intellectuals. His lip smacking habit portrays him as a careful, thoughtful speaker, reflecting his background as an academic who weighs words before he speaks. He represents the betrayed intellectuals in Africa. Number 2 was Comrade Ngobile Melusi from Zimbabwe. He is described as a person who had a bushy moustache, which when he spoke wriggled over his mouth like a moth fighting to free its wings and then fly away. Let us look at the meaning. The moth simile makes him appear comic and restless, mocking his present state. It symbolizes his faded glory. Remember, he was once a liberation fighter. Now he's worn out and is just a shadow of his former self. He represents the disillusioned freedom fighters of Africa. Number 3, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka from Nigeria. He is described as a person who looked like a sumo wrestler and that his eyes had a strange quality. The eyes would narrow into slits when he relaxed. They would narrow further when he smiled, and they would vanish altogether when he laughed. What does it mean? His body makes him look bulky and clumsy. This is a satirical image that undermines the authority respected of a religious leader. His eyes, the way they vanish, suggest secrecy, slyness, and a hidden motive, he does not appear somebody who is trustworthy. He basically represents the moral figure, the religious moral figure in politics that looks both ridiculous and suspicious. And lastly, we have Engineer Saif Tair from Libya. He is described as somebody whose walk seemed to be a motion powered by rebellion. This basically means his very movement is described as rebellious, basically to suggest that he embodies defiance and resistance. This raises the question, is he rebellious against a system, a person, or a whole order of leadership? It basically reflects his inner protest against oppression and dictatorship in Africa. He is a representation of dissatisfied technocrats and the will to challenge the political status quo. The overall pattern that is portrayed in the first episode, basically we see Professor Karanja Kimani as brought out as somebody who is wary but thoughtful intellectual. He is a betrayed academic. Comrade Ngobile Melusi is restless, a comic liberation fighter, but is seen as a faded hero. Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, on the other hand, is portrayed as bulky, a sly religious leader, somebody who is suspicious moral voice. And Engineer Saif Tair is brought out as a defiant technocrat, basically a rebellious activist. Why does Paul B Vitta introduce the characters, the four strangers, basically in a satirical, physical description? Number one, he does so to expose the gap between their past glory and their present realities. Number two, he does so to highlight the theme of disillusionment. The so-called liberators and moral leaders have lost their stature. And lastly, he does this, he uses humor and irony basically to ridicule African leadership crisis. Let us look at the reasons why Paul B Vitta introduces characters in a satirical way. Number one, he does so to expose the flaws in leaders. Paul B Vitta mocks the physical appearance of characters to reflect their inner weaknesses. For example, when we look at Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, failed sumo wrestler, the body and the vanishing eyes suggest clumsiness and slyness, undermining the dignity of a religious leader. The satire here makes it clear that the figures who should inspire respect are basically imperfect and not very convincing. Number two, he does so to symbolize Africans' disillusionment. Each satirical description carries a symbolic meaning about Africa's failed leadership. For example, when Melusi's moustache is seen as wriggling like a moth, it brings out liberation heroes reduced to comic, restless figures. And when we see Kimani's bald head, and his lips smacking, it brings out the wary intellectuals who are betrayed by their state. Therefore, instead of presenting these characters as noble heroes, Paul B Vitta shows them as flawed, representing how African promises after independence has collapsed. It has collapsed into disappointments. Number three, he does so to use humor as criticism. We all know that satire entertains while criticizing. Therefore, by using comic exaggeration, Paul B Vitta makes readers laugh but also reflect on serious issues. For example, when he describes Melusi's moustache as a moth, that is something funny, but also it undermines his lost stature as a former liberation fighter. Therefore, you realize that humor softens the critique, but it ensures it stays very memorable. Number four, Paul B Vitta does so to foreshadow failures of unity. From the very first introductions, the recruits are portrayed as inadequate, suspicious, or laughable. This foreshadows the failure of the Banjul summit. Leaders who look ridiculous at first sight cannot be expected to deliver transformation. Look at how the characters are described. We are told Professor Karanja Kimani is 60 years old with bald and smacks his lip. Comrade Kobile Melusi is 70 years old with a moustache that seems to wriggle as if it wants to be freed. Pastor Chineke Chiamaka is 50 years old, his bulk is a failed sumo wrestler. And then this other guy, Engineer Saif Tail, is said to be walking like somebody who's powered by emotion, powered by defiance. Basically, all that shows failure of unity. They can't basically bring out something. And number five, he does so to emphasize satire as a stylistic choice. Remember, we say the entire text, Fathers of Nation, is a satire. And you realize that as Fathers of Nation being a satirical novel, its aim is to ridicule African political class while exposing their failures. Therefore, by starting with satirical introduction, Paul B. Vitta sets the tone. Therefore, readers should expect irony, humor, and mockery throughout the text as we go through. That is basically what happens when we talk about when the four strangers arrive at the Seamount Hotel. Episode 2. This is basically the time the caller, the guide, calls the four strangers. We are told there's an anonymous caller who calls himself a guide. This caller contacts one Professor Karanja Kimani from Kenya. He calls Comrade Gombele Melusi from Zimbabwe, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka from Nigeria, and Engineer Saif Tair from Libya. What is the content of his call? Basically, he tells them, I have called you with a message from AGDA, which is Agency for Governance and Development in Africa. And he tells them, there is a briefcase in your room. Have you seen it? They all agree, we have seen it. But now the question is, what is the content of the briefcase? He tells them the briefcase holds AGDA's blueprint, Path Alpha, and other documents. Path Alpha is basically the rival plan to the way Omega being pushed at the summit. This is the evidence they must use to sway the direction of the meeting. And for them to open that, there is a combination lock, and the caller refuses to reveal his name, remember? But he is able to provide the combination code, which he says is 1124. This combination code opens the briefcase. The fact that he has the combination code, he has the content, he knows how to he knows which code to open the briefcase, but he refuses to tell them his name. This shows he has authority. The caller has authority and access, even though he remains the shadow behind everything. The caller's identity, when he is asked to identify himself, remember, he insists that his name is unnecessary. He says what matters is the mission and the contents of the briefcase. He insists they call him the guide, their guide. This insistence on anonymity emphasizes secrecy, risk, and distrust in political operations. But by the end of the day, the four strangers are able to recognize him as a very educated Nigerian. How do they do this? From his accent, his careful grammar, and polished choice of words, the four strangers quickly recognize that the mysterious caller must be an educated Nigerian. You realize that this is Vitta's way of giving the caller an identity through speech, style, rather than a direct description.